Welcome to this new episode of the Believe in Balance podcast, where we are sitting in for your usual host, David Dansero, to unpack his new course offering. He's bringing his full 5-module evidence-based course, Achieve Balance, to his education platform on Substack. He asks us to look through the course material and do a deep dive of the course materials and personal story of his why. Ready? Let's get started. So, think about this for a second.
Okay.
What if the very medical warning that's like meant to save your life,
Yeah.
you know, a doctor looking you dead in the eye and telling you to change your habits right now or you'll face a massive heart attack.
Yeah.
What if that is actually, psychologically speaking, guaranteed to fail long term?
I mean, it sounds completely counterintuitive, right? We just
Yeah.
assume that a brush with mortality is like the ultimate wake-up call.
Exactly. You'd think fear would work.
Right, but the data tells a very different story about human behavior, and this gets right to the core of what we are unpacking today from the sources, which is David's Body and Balance book, all 300 pages of it, and his Module 1 course materials.
Yeah, which is a lot to distill, but it's so important for you, the listener, if you're trying to figure out your own health journey.
Totally, because before we even look at the mechanics of health, we have to look at the engine that's, driving the whole operation. And David approaches this not just as a physical therapist and nutritionist, but as a stroke survivor.
Which gives him a really unique perspective.
Oh, absolutely. He had to reconstruct his own physical autonomy from scratch, and he uses this beautifully straightforward framework throughout the course: measure, manage, move.
Right.
But the foundational step, like the bedrock of all of this, requires locking in your why.
Okay, let's unpack this, because finding your why can sound a little like a motivational poster in a corporate break room, if we aren't careful.
Oh, for sure. The hang in there, cat.
Exactly. But David breaks motivation down into 2 scientifically distinct categories, right? Extrinsic and intrinsic.
Right.
Extrinsic motivation is when you are driven by external rewards or, heavily in the health space, avoiding catastrophic negative consequences.
Yeah, it's the doctor's fear-based warning we just talked about, or like the panic of seeing a bad blood test result. What's fascinating here is that fear is actually a highly potent catalyst. I mean, from an evolutionary perspective, the sheer panic of a severe warning spikes your adrenaline and cortisol.
Right, gets you moving.
It absolutely gets you out the door and onto the treadmill on day one. But the problem is that human beings are incredibly adaptable. We habituate to fear.
We get used to it.
Exactly. The human brain simply cannot sustain a state of high alert indefinitely. Eventually, the initial shock of that bad blood test just sort of wears off.
Yeah, the doctor's grim warning just fades into the background noise of paying bills and, managing daily life.
Right. And once the brain down-regulates that fear response, if there is no other driving force to replace it, the old comfortable habits come rushing right back.
Which brings us to the counterpart, right? Intrinsic motivation.
Yes.
This is engaging in an activity because the act itself is inherently rewarding. It's joyful, or it's deeply tied to your personal identity.
Yeah, doing it for the sake of doing it.
Exactly. Think about building a campfire. Extrinsic motivation, that fear or external pressure, is just the spark.
I like that analogy.
Right. You need it to catch the kindling. It is fantastic for initiating action. But intrinsic motivation, that is the thick oak log.
Yeah, that is what actually keeps the fire burning through the cold night when the initial spark is long gone.
So true.
And David's own recovery provides a brilliant illustration of this mechanism in action. After his stroke, he obviously had, a mountain of clinical functional rehabilitation to do.
Yeah, I can't even imagine.
Right, but instead of just prescribing himself endless, repetitive clinical drills just to avoid physical decline, he anchored his recovery in something deeply intrinsic. He set out to learn how to play the drums.
I love that detail so much.
Yeah.
Because it shifts the entire narrative from, I am doing this so my body doesn't break down further, to, I am doing this to master a new, exciting skill.
Exactly. And the neuroplasticity involved in learning an instrument is staggering.
Oh, I bet.
The rhythm, the musicality, the intense neurological challenge of coordinating all 4 limbs independently, it was highly effective functional rehabilitation. But the psychological framing is what matters most here.
Because it's fun.
Right. He wasn't playing the drums motivated by the fear of another stroke. He was playing them because the challenge itself engaged him.
Yeah, and when you anchor health behaviors in something that builds you up, something that provides a dopamine hit of joy or mastery, compliance rates don't just improve, they skyrocket.
Absolutely.
So, okay, you figure out your log, you find that intrinsic motivation, you have your fuel, but before you can, hit the gas pedal, You have to figure out if your engine is actually ready to turn over.
This is such a critical step.
Right. And this is where David introduces some behavioral research he was involved with at the Miriam Hospital's Behavioral Medicine Department. It focuses on something called the trans-theoretical model of behavior change.
Which I know sounds like really dense academic jargon.
Oh, totally. Yeah. But it is actually just a roadmap of human habit alteration. And it's broken down into 5 distinct stages: pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, and maintenance.
Right. And understanding this model is literally the difference between lasting change and burning out in a week.
How so?
Well, applying the wrong type of pressure at the wrong stage is a guaranteed recipe for failure. Take pre-contemplation, right? The very first stage.
Okay.
At this point, a person is only just beginning to gain the slightest, faintest awareness that a change might be beneficial, but they have absolutely no intention of acting on it anytime soon.
They're just not ready.
Exactly. The friction happens when the medical system, or, well-meaning friends, prescribe action stage solutions to a pre-contemplation stage individual.
Oh, I see.
If you tell someone in pre-contemplation to overhaul their entire diet and hit the gym 5 days a week, they will completely reject it. The intervention does not match their psychological readiness.
Okay, I have to pause here, though, and look at this from the listener's perspective. Yeah. Let's say you are listening to this right now, and you think, wow, I am totally stuck in pre-contemplation. I know I need to change, but I have zero energy or desire to actually start.
Yeah, that's a common feeling.
Right. Isn't identifying that inherently discouraging? Like, how do you move to the next stage, contemplation or preparation, without forcing it and triggering that massive burnout you just mentioned?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, recognizing you are in pre-contemplation is not a failure at all. It is a massive victory of self-awareness.
Brilliant.
A victory.
Absolutely. The entire point of this model is to stop judging yourself against the action stage. If you identify that you are in pre-contemplation, your goal should not be to run a 5K or meal prep for the whole week.
Okay, so what should it be?
Your goal should simply be to read one article about the benefits of daily walking. Or, frankly, just to listen to this deep dive.
Oh, wow. So just gathering info. Right. You lower the barrier to entry so drastically that it matches your exact psychological capacity right now. By giving yourself permission to just gather information neutrally, you quietly transition yourself into the contemplation phase.
Without the overwhelming pressure that causes people to quit.
Precisely.
That reframing is huge. So let's say you've gently moved through contemplation and you arrive at the preparation phase. You need a blueprint, right?
Yes, you do.
Because setting a goal without a structured framework is like deciding to build a massive, complex piece of IKEA furniture, but throwing away the instruction manual.
Oh, man, that's a nightmare scenario.
Right. You might have all the raw materials and you might put in a ton of sweat equity, but the moment you lean any weight on the final product, the whole thing is going to collapse.
Exactly.
To prevent that collapse, David leans heavily into the SMART goal acronym.
Right. Specific, measurable, action-oriented, realistic, and time-based. We hear this acronym often, but we rarely discuss why the human brain actually requires it to succeed.
Yeah, why is that?
Well, the brain is essentially an energy-conserving organ. It hates ambiguity.
Because ambiguity takes work.
Exactly. Ambiguity requires decision-making, and decision-making burns calories. If your goal is a vague, I want to get fit, your brain has to wake up every single morning and make 1,000 micro-decisions about what fit means today.
And then decision fatigue sets in.
Right. By 10 a.m., you default to old habits. But a SMART goal pre-makes all those decisions. It severely lowers the cognitive load.
And David applied this incredibly rigorously to his own life. Following his stroke, he set this moonshot goal. He decided he was going to return to running.
Yeah, and not just a light jog around his neighborhood. He wanted to run a marathon.
Which is wild. To achieve something of that magnitude post-stroke, vague hope wouldn't cut it. He had to break that massive, intimidating goal down into hyper-specific, measurable daily actions.
And the course points to some fantastic toolkit resources to help you build those daily actions.
Yeah, like the Harvard Medical School's 101 Tips for Tip-Top Health Guide.
Which is packed with evidence-based strategies, right? Things on sleep hygiene, social connections, brain-boosting foods.
But here's where it gets really interesting. The tools give you the what, but David introduces a deeply psychological method for accountability.
Yes, and it goes far beyond checking off boxes on a habit tracker app.
Definitely. He advocates for writing your goals down in a physical journal, but then taking it a crucial step further. You record a video of yourself describing your success vision.
He calls it creating a power action movie of your progress.
I mean, that feels incredibly vulnerable, sitting in front of your phone camera and talking to your future self about what success looks like.
It is vulnerable. And that is precisely why it is effective. The psychological weight of visualization is immense.
Because you're saying it out loud.
Yeah, when you verbalize your goals out loud to a camera and you articulate exactly what success looks and feels like the energy you'll have, the things you'll be able to do, you are fundamentally altering your cognitive approach.
Making it real.
Right. You are dragging the goal out of the abstract ether of your mind and forcing it into physical reality. Watching yourself speak about your own success creates a powerful neurofeedback loop.
Wow.
It triggers mirror neurons and builds self-efficacy in a way that silently swiping a completed task on a screen simply cannot replicate.
Okay, so we have our motivation, we understand our stage of readiness, and we've built a smart blueprint backed by our own personal action movie.
We're doing great so far.
But here is the reality check, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even the greatest architectural blueprint is completely useless if you don't know what building materials you currently have sitting on the site.
That's a great point.
You cannot chart a reliable path forward if you don't have an honest baseline measurement of where you are standing right now.
Mm-hmm.
This brings us to the measure pillar of David's formula, starting with the energy balance equation.
Right, which is the foundational law of human metabolism.
Yeah.
At its core, it is energy in versus energy out.
Simple enough on paper.
Yeah. On the energy inside of the ledger, we are looking at carbohydrates, fats, proteins, and a category that's heavily overlooked but packs a dense caloric punch: alcohol.
Oh yeah, people always forget about that one.
Always. And then on the energy outside, people usually assume the biggest factor is their hour at the gym. But the largest component of energy expenditure by far is actually your resting metabolic rate, or RMR.
Right, and think of RMR like a car idling in the driveway. The car isn't moving, but the engine is still running, the radio is playing, and the AC is blasting.
And that burns gas.
Exactly. Your RMR is the energy your body burns, just keeping the lights on, keeping your heart beating, your lungs expanding, and your brain firing while you are sitting perfectly still on the couch.
Yeah, and to that baseline, you add non-exercise daily activity, like walking to the mailbox, and finally, your specific exercise energy.
So to start getting a handle on this equation, David suggests utilizing free tools like the Fat Secret app.
Yeah. But to actually jumpstart the body back into a state of balance, he focuses on what he calls the 3 Fs: fluids, fiber, and fats.
Specifically healthy omega essential fatty acids, right?
Exactly. And the statistics regarding fiber intake in the modern diet are particularly alarming. The standard American diet, which appropriately spells SAD, averages less than 10 grams of fiber per day.
That's incredibly low.
It is, especially when the clinical recommendation is 25 to 35 plus grams.
And we hear the word fiber and immediately think of digestion, right? But it is so much deeper than that.
Absolutely. The mechanism here is vital. Fiber is not just, inert material passing through you. It is the primary food source for the trillions of microbes living in your gut microbiome.
Right.
When those bacteria ferment fiber, they produce short-chain fatty acids. And these are crucial molecules that regulate systemic inflammation, manage blood sugar stability, and even influence the production of neurotransmitters like serotonin.
Wow, so it affects your mood, too.
Yes. Starving your gut microbiome of fiber doesn't just impact digestion, it cascades into brain fog, chronic fatigue, and immune suppression.
All right, I need to jump in here and play the role of the overwhelmed listener.
Go for it.
Because frankly, I have been there. I have downloaded the tracking apps, felt incredibly motivated on Monday, and by Thursday, I completely abandoned it.
It happens to the best of us.
Why? Because I didn't know how to log the macros of my mom's homemade lasagna, or I forgot to log my lunch, and suddenly the whole process felt like a massive guilt-inducing chore.
Yeah, it becomes stressful.
So for someone just dipping their toes into this, isn't calculating RMR, tracking every macro, and obsessing over every gram of fiber a guaranteed way to throw them right back into that pre-contemplation stage?
This raises an important question, and it is the most common trap in the entire health and wellness space. Your frustration is entirely valid.
It's just too much math sometimes.
The anxiety of imperfect tracking derails thousands of people. But this is where we have to clarify David's intention. The goal of measuring at this stage is absolutely not about demanding immediate perfection.
Oh, okay.
It's not about hitting a flawless caloric target. It is entirely about awareness and data gathering.
So it's just about seeing what's there, no judgment.
Precisely. Tracking your food and fluids for a few days isn't an exercise in judgment or restriction. It is an exercise in neutral observation.
I love that phrase, neutral observation.
Yeah, you simply need to demystify what fuels are coming into your system. When you look at the app and realize, neutrally, that you only consumed 8 grams of fiber today, it stops being a confusing mystery why you feel sluggish.
It makes sense.
Weight and energy management stop feeling like a roll of the genetic dice, right?
Yeah.
They become a tangible, observable equation that you hold the power to tweak.
It really takes the emotion out of it. Okay, so we have the psychology dialed in and we have the baseline numbers mapped out. But numbers on a spreadsheet only tell half the story.
That's very true.
The ultimate undeniable expression of health is how your physical body actually moves through the physical world. I mean, a perfect macro split doesn't mean much if you can't comfortably bend over to tie your shoes.
Exactly. And this is where David introduces the smart movement screen and the concept of your movement age.
Movement age. What exactly does that measure?
Well, movement age is a deeply revealing metric. The smart movement screen isn't just about, how much weight you can lift in the gym. It assesses fundamental human biomechanics.
Like flexibility and stuff.
Right. It checks whether your shoulders have the actual joint mobility to reach fully overhead without compensation, or if your hips and ankles possess the range of motion required to perform a deep squat without your heels lifting off the floor.
That's harder than it sounds.
It really is. In David's system, if you score less than a 6 on the screen and you are under 60 years old, it is a glaring indicator of significant mobility impairment.
And I imagine our daily environments are the main culprit here, right?
Oh, they are the primary driver. Our modern lifestyle, sitting hunched over laptops, staring down at smartphones, sitting in cars for hours, it mechanically forces our bodies into a chronically shortened flex position.
We're basically folding ourselves in half all day.
Exactly. It is why David strongly integrates protocols like the Otago exercise program.
What's the Otago program?
It's a highly specific series of leg muscle strengthening and balance retraining exercises. And originally, it was designed to prevent falls in the elderly.
Okay, but we're talking about it for younger people.
Yes, and that's the startling reality. Because of our sedentary, desk-bound lives, adults in their 30s and 40s are increasingly exhibiting the diminished balance and hip weakness that we used to only see in octogenarians.
So what does this all mean for you? I think about movement age exactly like the mileage and maintenance on a car.
That's a good way to look at it.
Right. Your biological age, the year the car rolled off the assembly line, only tells a fraction of the story. Think about a 5-year-old car. If it has been sitting in a damp garage rotting or driven aggressively over potholes without ever once getting the alignment or suspension checked,
it's going to be in terrible shape.
That 5-year-old car is going to drive like an absolute wreck. Meanwhile, a 15-year-old car that has been tuned up, driven consistently, and maintained with care will run smoothly.
Yeah, it isn't about the year it was made.
Exactly. It is about how the chassis and the engine have been treated. Aren't our bodies operating on the exact same logic?
They absolutely are, and this is far from a modern realization. David concludes his foundational review with a really powerful insight from Hippocrates, the ancient Greek father of modern medicine.
Over 2 millennia ago, right?
Yes. Hippocrates observed a fundamental law of human biology. Parts of the body that are used in moderation and exercised in labors to which they are accustomed stay healthy, become well-developed, and age slowly.
Makes sense.
But if they are left unused and idle, they become liable to disease, defective in growth, and age incredibly quickly.
Liable to disease and age quickly. Wow. That is a chillingly accurate description of what happens when we trap ourselves in desk chairs for 8 hours a day.
It really is. When you synthesize that ancient wisdom with our modern reality, it illustrates exactly why David's concept of achieving physical balance is so desperately vital today.
Because we aren't moving anymore.
Right. The core hardware of our biology hasn't changed since the time of Hippocrates. Only our environment has. We have engineered movement completely out of our daily lives, and our bodies are paying a severe, rapid aging penalty for that convenience.
It really pulls the entire picture into sharp focus. Let's do a quick recap of the journey we've taken today through the foundation of Module 1.
Sounds good.
It all begins with identifying that thick oak log, your intrinsic motivation to keep the fire burning when fear fades. From there, you must honestly identify your current stage of behavior change so you can apply the right amount of pressure and avoid burnout.
Exactly.
You build your blueprint using SMART goals, lowering the cognitive load on your brain, and you lock it in with a power action movie to visualize your success.
Yes.
Then you gather neutral baseline data on your energy balance, focusing on the 3 F's of fluids, fiber, and fats to fuel your microbiome. And finally, you assess your movement age, and commit to keeping the physical machinery out of the garage and actively moving.
And, if you are listening to this right now, I want to remind you of how that trans-theoretical model works.
Oh, right. The stages of change.
Yeah. Just by tuning in today, by engaging with these concepts and internally reflecting on your own why, you have already succeeded in moving the needle.
That's awesome.
You aren't in pre-contemplation anymore. You are actively participating in the contemplation and preparation stages. You are gathering the tools. That is a tangible, measurable win for today.
It really is. And we're going to leave you with one final thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day.
Yeah.
If Hippocrates fundamentally understood over 2,000 years ago that idle bodies age rapidly and openly invite disease, why do we still stubbornly treat physical movement as a modern chore to be checked off a to-do list, rather than embracing it as an ancient, non-negotiable requirement for human life?